Hello everyone, thanks for joining. Welcome back to GOAT. Today we have another episode of Your Questions Answered, and this one is coming from user Satya Banukal. I hope I said that right. Satya or Satyab, whichever one you go by. Sir, looking for a comprehensive tutorial on how to build a sum module or function which would exactly work as it works in MS Excel. Another problem which I am facing is, for example, I have a tabular form. In row 2, there are 2 numeric columns. I want to copy the entire row and paste in the next row with the condition that if the numeric values in the previous row are positive, then the new or pasted row will convert to negative or vice versa. Can I get helps on this? Regards. Thank you so much for writing. Anyone who may be watching, I hope this helps you. We're going to get very comprehensive in the answer to hopefully help all of you out. So thanks so much for joining. Stay tuned. So the first thing we want to do is we want to basically summarize the 2 points here in this question. Number one is we want a sum functionality that's exactly like Excel. Now you notice I put that in yellow. There's a reason for that, but that's okay. We'll carry on. And the second one was we basically want to copy a row with the numbers in it and reverse the signs of the numeric values within those numbers. So I think I've got this right. I don't have any screenshots to work off of, unfortunately. So hopefully I'm comprehensive enough that you will be able to take what I have in this video and then apply it to your specific example, whether you wrote this question or maybe you have this question, maybe you're a new user. So you may be wondering why exactly right here is in yellow, and the reason is because you cannot exactly get access summing functions to work like Excel. There's a reason for that though. Not saying Access can't sum like Excel can, but it's not going to work exactly the same, and I'm going to show you guys. So if you're new to Access, I don't know if you are, Satya, but if you watching the viewer are new to Access, or you're wondering what the differences are when you take a spreadsheet versus a database table, for instance, I'm going to go over that. So I'm going to try to put bookmarks in this video. So if you don't need this beginner portion of this, go ahead and skip to which part you need. But the first part of this video is we really need to define and explain the differences between why a sum function in Excel works way different than a sum function in Access. So here are 2 very important points that I want to make, and then I'm going to show you on the screen how these work. So you have to realize that the basic unit of work in Excel is a range, and the basic unit of work in Access is a record, and they are 2 different things, which is why the sum functionality in Excel can't exactly be replicated in Access. So looking at this screen here, we have on the left, we have an Access table called table stuff, and these are just some fake entries with some fake values. I have 4 value columns here. I've just entered values in the first 2. On the right, we have Excel, and it is an exact replica of this table's data. Now, remember what I said previously, which was the basic unit of work in Excel is a range, and the sum function for Excel works on ranges. What do I mean by that? So a range in Excel is anything you can select. I can select one cell and it's a range. I can select an entire column and it's a range. Select multiple rows and columns. I can go just a row. I can even do things where I hold down Control and do weird stuff like this, or I do weird stuff like this. And you'll notice that, I don't know if you pay attention to this, at the bottom of Excel, if you can sum these numbers, it's going to show it here. So, okay, whatever. So sum right there. If I get this entire column, it's giving me the sum, 589. These 2, 78. I can go across, sum to 11. I can highlight this entire column, which is probably how most people do it. And they do, let's see, editing, auto sum. There you go, 589. That is 589. Or I can go across and do another auto sum. 56 is that auto sum across. Now in Access, the entire or the basic unit of work is a record. A record is an entire row. An entire row. So in Access, I can't drag and select a column like I can in Excel, because in Excel, this is a range. Excel really doesn't care what you're doing. It's kind of a blank slate. In Access, these are independent records. So I can't just drag I mean, you can trick Access sometimes to do this, but it won't do anything. So if I hit Control C and I hit Control V, it's pasting nothing. You don't have real records. The way Access works is you have to get an entire record at a time. So what I can do is I can do this, Control C, Control V. I've duplicated the records. Now, we're not wanting to do that necessarily, but the point remains, you have to realize that in Access, the unit of work that you're dealing with is a record, which is an entire row. The unit of work in Excel is wildly different. I can do one cell, I can do this, etc. So the sum function is going to be a little bit different. Now, can we still sum? Yes, there's lots of ways to sum in Access, and it really depends on how you need it to work to determine what works best for you. So I'm going to show you a few ways to do it. You did say thorough, so I'm going to get very thorough in how you do the sum function, and then I'm going to go over the second part of this question. So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy it. I hope this helps both you, Satya, and anyone else who may be watching. Here we go. So first, going back to our example here, let's ask the question, why are we summing certain things? So for instance, if I were to, let's say I'm going to filter this here, and I know we're in Excel, don't worry, we will get to Access in a second. Okay, so I'm going to filter, and I'm going to filter and just look at the motorcycles because they're the coolest, and then I'm going to auto sum. So we must ask ourselves, well, why are we summing these two rows? Because we're looking at motorcycles. So there's the key point. We're wanting to sum based upon a condition. The condition happens to be, in this example, motorcycles. We're summing the things that are motorcycle entries and not anything else. So whether we want to sum everything or we want to sum certain things, it's possible in Access. So I'm going to show you multiple ways to do it. Now let's get rid of Excel because we are done with Excel for now. So now we are looking at Access. This is a table, so we're going to get out of this table. Now you can do a totals function for a table. You don't really want to view raw table data if you can help it. So what I did was I made a form that is a continuous form of that table. So this looks very similar to the table, but it's a form. Now the difference between these two may not seem very apparent at first, but with a form, I can have events trigger through code, etc. So let's do the simplest one. This is a data sheet. So if we go to the properties here of this table over here, this is a data sheet form. So then the easy way to do this would be just give ourselves a totals column here, and then we're going to sum, pick the sum, and let's go ahead and sum these other 4 columns here. So now we have sum columns. Pretty simple. And the cool thing is, let's say I filter by motorcycles. That sum column is going to automatically update to the data that I'm viewing. So let's say we wanted to see just airplanes. We're summing airplanes, we're summing. So this sum is going to be reactive to the filter. That is very different than the Excel. Remember, in Excel, it did not do that. So let's delete this. So now let's give myself an auto sum. Okay, 589. Now, if I filter to cars, first of all, I don't even see the auto sum because I'm only viewing the cars row. So my auto sum has disappeared. Whereas in Access, this sum will be reactive to what you're looking at within the form. Now, what if you don't want to use a data sheet, you want to use a continuous form? Can you do a sum row? Of course you can. So here I have a copy of the form, but this is in continuous view, continuous forms. This is not a data sheet. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange this, but the thing you want to make sure on this form is you right-click the header up here, the detail header, and you want to give it a form header and a form footer. So let's go ahead and give there we go. Okay, so now we have a form header and a form footer. So we're going to use this form footer to sum the columns that are in here. So I'm going to be right back. I'm going to arrange these so that they're much cleaner. Like right now, these are ugly. If I look at this form, this would be super ugly. So I'm going to arrange this to make it look like a data sheet. Okay, so we are back. So you can see here on my screen, this is a continuous form, not a data sheet. And I've basically arranged everything. Normally you would probably have this ID invisible, but for our purposes, I don't have it invisible. Now, when we look at this form, it looks somewhat similar to a data sheet, but this is a continuous form. Now, how do we get a sum row working in here? Because you'll notice our totals function is blank on a continuous forms. We can get it in a data sheet. If we go over here, see we have the totals working here, but we can't on a continuous form. So how do we get that totals working? It's actually pretty simple. So what we want to do is down here in the footer, you want to insert a text field. Now, text fields are special in Access because they can do lots of things, not just text. So let's give ourselves kind of a larger font, and I'm going to leave it white just for now. Okay, now what is the name of this text box? This text box is called value1. So similar to Excel, we would do sum in brackets, square brackets, value1, close brackets. And that's it. Now check it out. Actually, let's go ahead and make this blue, and then there we go. And there we're here. We have at the bottom here, 589, that's our sum. Now you'll notice it's not going to be right under the last row. It always appears in the footer of the form, so that's one of the major differences. This total row appears last after the new row entry if you have that allowed on your form. This one always appears in the footer. Now what we can do is we can easily give ourselves sum boxes for each of the values. So if you don't want to just type it in, you can come over here to the properties of this text box, just double click it, or you can look at the property sheet and you're looking for the data. Now I'm going to right click and zoom in. So see, this is summing the field called value1. We're going to change that to value2. It doesn't really matter what the name of this text box is unless you need to refer to it in code or something, you know, like this is text 50. That doesn't mean anything to me, but if you don't need to refer to it in code, it's okay. So I'm going to sum value3, and then one more. We're going to copy paste again, and we're going to sum value4. So I'm going to go over here to the control source. We're just going to sum value4. Cool. And then there we have it. We have summing columns for these rows here. Now, question. Now this is something a lot of normal Access users don't maybe know how to do, but if you're advanced or maybe this database is just for you, how do I filter this? And will these sums update? Yes. So what you can do is, as long as your form in the properties and other shortcut menu enabled equals yes. If you do that, you can right click and you're going to get filter options. The filters don't appear at the top in a drop down like they do here. These are actually really nice filters. These are just like Excel, almost just like Excel. You can do a lot of things with these filters. Here you don't get that, but you do get something similar. So if I find motorcycles and I want to filter to motorcycles, I right click. Let's do this. There we go. Equals motorcycles. And you'll notice that my sums have updated to the filter that I'm currently on. And then I can turn that filter off. I can toggle the filter, etc. So if I wanted to look at just cars, equals cars, there you go. So with the continuous form, I can auto sum very similar to this, which is kind of how the Excel works. Again, Excel, I can just drag and drop and do all kinds of weird stuff. In Access, it needs to know what you're trying to sum as far as all the records. It doesn't work off cells. So I can't go across and say, you know, I want to sum 56 and 23. That's not how Access works. Now I can give myself a field that will sum these two. So for instance, in case you guys want to know, what if I wanted an extra field in here that just summed values 1 and 2? Well, that's pretty simple. What I would do is I'm going to give myself just an unbound text box. So I just copied that. So the control source is unbound. Now in the control source, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and zoom in, and I'm just going to go value1 plus value2. And I'm going to name this val 1 and 2. I have to trap the and sign. Oh, I'm missing my equal. There we go. Thanks for warning me. So now, if I wanted to inline sum up value 1 and value 2, I could just give myself a field on this form. I could also make a query, and that query would just sum these two as a field in the query, and then make this form's record source that query. There's a million ways to do this. There's a million ways to pull this off. Now, if you're using a continuous form to do your summing, here's where things can get tricky. So notice that I've given myself this column here, which is summing value 1 and value 2 as a value 3. And you'll notice I do not have a sum box here. So what if we wanted to sum this column? What happens? Okay, so I'm just going to copy this over. Now the name of this text box is text53, so I'm going to go into and just do text53. Easy enough. Now let's look. Oh boy, look at what just happened here. We have errors. Why is that? Well, notice that I am using an expression to get the value of this text box. It is adding value 1 and value 2 to get value 3. If I'm doing that, I can't use another text box with an expression to sum this, because it's going to give me an error. So what I would need to do if I wanted to sum this column without an error, what I have to do is I have to go in here to this control source, and I'm just going to sum what that text box is made of, which is value 1 plus value 2. So I've basically broken that down, and now you see it sums properly. So if you have an expression, if you have a text box that is an expression within the control source, you cannot then sum that in a footer in another text box. It doesn't work. Now, when you're doing these sums, you also have access to other options like count. Count is a function that's also in Excel. But you have to be careful, because in Access we have this thing called null. So here I've got this record here that I've inserted that has a null entry name. Now, let's say we wanted to know how many records we were looking at any one time. How would we do that? Well, I'm going to copy my text box over here since I've already got it formatted. And instead of using sum, I'm going to get in here, and I'm going to zoom, and I'm going to count entry name. Now I want you to see what happens when I do that. You'll notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 records, but since this is null, this is not counted, so my count of my entry name is 6. So really what I would want to do is count my ID. Since that is a primary key, it's an auto number. And so what we can do is, since we're using a text box, we can do some cool stuff. So we can say equals quote records colon space append count ID. Now we have, oh cool, 7 records. We're adding up value 1, value 2, etc. You can do that same trick down here. So I can zoom in, and I can say val 1 append the sum, and there we have val 1 is 623, etc. So that's how you can pull a sum function off in forms. Now, hopefully that answered the first part of the sum functionality. There's kind of a million ways we could do that. We could actually write code in VBA where we pass, let's say, a function, an array of numbers. We could get a sum out of that. That's like within code. So I think hopefully you meant that we needed to be able to sum in a form. So there's a couple of ways to do that. Now you can also do this with subforms. The subform may have to, the parent form may have to do something kind of weird to do a subform summing function, but it is possible. There's kind of so many ways to answer this question. Let's move now to the second part, which is copy a row, and then we're going to reverse the sign of the numeric values. Now this is going to be interesting. So let's work with our continuous form. You can also do this on a data form, but let's do it on a continuous form because it'll be a little bit easier to understand. Let's get rid of that here. Okay, we're on our continuous form, we're in design mode. So how would we do this? Well, we know what we want to do. We know that I'm going to put a button here. I'm going to assume this is not a subform that has a parent form that would have a button. So I'm going to assume every row wants this button. And you can kind of adapt this to however you need it. So I'm going to go to form design and I'm going to put a button right here. And it's going to bring up the wizard, don't care. And I'm going to rename this CMD copy, and then I'm just going to make it very plain copy. It's just going to be a button called copy. So what we want to do is when the user clicks this button to copy, let's assume we don't want a verification. So we don't want to verify. We're just going to make a copy of this, but we're going to reverse all the values. So how are we going to do that? So I've got my button copy. I'm going to go to event on click code builder. Okie dokie, we're in our snazzy code. If you want to know how to get your VBA environment to look like this, check out the description below. I have a video on how to do that. It's really simple and it makes code very easy to read, much easier than the default color scheme. Okay, so I am coding this live. Let's see how good I can do it. how much I have to edit this video. Okay, so let's resize our windows here. So what we want to do is when we click this, we want to make a copy of this record, but we're going to reverse all the numeric values. So right now I'm just going to write values 1 and 2, and then we'll see how we copy them to the other columns within that record. So okay, so first I'm going to give myself a few variables. One is going to be called the just s name, and it's going to be a string. And then I'm going to give myself lv1 as a long, lv2 as a long. Okay, now since I'm working within the form, I'm going to enclose this with a bracket with me and with. I go ahead and end it out that way. Okie dokie. Now then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set lv1 equal to, now to reverse a value, we just multiply by -1. So my variable lv1 is going to equal value 1 times -1. So if value 1 is negative, it will make it positive. If it's positive, it will make it negative. However, one thing we must remember in Access is that you have to deal with null values. The possibility of null. This will bite you every time. It still bites me, and I do this for a living. I do this as a pro. Okay, so lv1 equals nz, which means if, let's do a dot. Let me get my cursor out of the way. Dot value 1. What are we going to default to? We're going to default it to 0 if it's null. So what this means is my variable v1, lv1, is going to equal value 1 or 0. If value 1 is null, it's going to be 0 times -1. lv2 equals nz.value 2, 0 times -1. So now I've got my variables that have flipped the sign of what is in front, or sorry, what is already there on the record. And then my s name equals, I don't have to do this, but I'm just doing this just to show you how it works. Entry name. It's okay if s name is null because I'm not performing any kind of math on s name. So now what do I have to do? So I've got these variables. I want to insert this as a new record into the database. How do I do that? So now normally I would have a function. I call it make it so, which actually, you know what? We're going to do that right now. We're going to code it right now. we're going to do private. Normally this would be a public function, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm sorry, not a function, a sub. Private sub, make it so. I'm going to pass it a past SQL string. So all make it so does, and I think I have this in another video too, do command.set warnings. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable the warnings because you'll get warned that you're about to insert a record. Do command.run SQL pSQL, do command.set warnings true. Pretty simple. So what this will do is this make it so gets passed a SQL string, and it just runs the SQL. That's all it does. Pretty simple. So now how do we do this? So in this type of scenario, we're going to do insert into. So that is the type of SQL command we're going to do. We could do this with a record set. That's a little more complex, but record sets are awesome. We won't get into that. That would be a separate video just on record sets. And there are actually multiple types of record sets. I like DAO. Let's go with how would we do this in, actually, let's give ourselves one more variable, which is our SQL string. Okay, what is our SQL string? Insert into, what's the name of the table, the destination. I'm going to put brackets around the fields just so it's easier to read. You typically don't need brackets unless you have spaces or you have some weird field names or something. Insert into table stuff. And here's how an insert into statement works. Insert into table stuff. What fields are we looking for? Remember, we don't have to do ID because ID is already an auto number, so that is taken care of. Entry name, value 1, value 2. Okay, so insert into table stuff, and then we put the fields in parentheses, and then we have a keyword values, and then we start another parentheses. Now I'm going to extend this out. Normally I would want to line return this, but just to make this very clear, I'm going to do one whole line so it's easier to read. Now remember, in SQL you have to wrap a string in single quotes. So the values is parentheses, single quote, and then I'm going to close the string out. Close the string out, and then I need to give myself, I'm going to append the sname variable, and then I'm going to continue the SQL string. So I'll do my double quote, single quote again. So I've wrapped that sname in single quotes, comma. Okay, now we're going to jump back out of the string. We're going to append LV1, quote, comma, back out of the string, append LV2, back into the string to do this, close out. That's our SQL statement. So let's test this before we do anything. Let's go ahead and test this. So we're going to debug.print SQL. So before we actually try to run this SQL statement, let's debug.print. We're going to get it to see below, and we're going to see what this looks like. So okay, I'm on my form here, and let's say I'm on this row here and I want to copy. This is what the SQL statement would look like. Insert into table stuff, entry name, value 1, values, motorcycles, notice the single quotes, and notice it is just flipped the values of 456 and 11, which is, yep, it flipped those to negative. I hope that's what you were needing. And there we go. Now, let's comment out the debug.print, and we're gonna make it so. We're gonna make that SQL run. Make it so. We're gonna pass it the SQL. Now I'm gonna show you. You may have already caught there might be a slight problem with this. Not too bad. So okay, I'm going to copy. Invalid use of null. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so notice, remember null gets us. So this is a string. A null cannot be a string. A null is null. A null is unknown. So what you have to do is nz, entry name. Now if we want it to be blank, we'll give it a double blank. If we wanted to use null, we would have to not make sname a string. We would declare sname as a variant. A variant can be assigned the value null. A string cannot. But we're just gonna go with, we know entry name is a string in the table, so we're just gonna give it a double quotes. I think that would end up being null anyway. So now we're gonna run this again, make sure we're not in a break mode. Okay, so we're gonna copy this row here. We've copied it. You're wondering, well, did we copy it? Nothing happened. Yes, we did. I did a refresh. We need to add something to this code here. So after we insert, we need to requery this table. So we call the method requery. We're going to requery the form. And so now when I do copy, so let's say I want to copy cars, boop, there we go. Cars has been this. Now I don't know how your interface may look, but anytime you need this, now this is being ordered by ID. So if we want to order by, let's say, entry name, sort A to Z, we could do something like this. So if we copy, trucks would appear here. And let's say I want to copy this cars. I've ordered this by this column name, and you can do that within the interface itself. Again, most normal access users don't know you can even right click to filter. You may want to set the form's record source to filter by the proper ordering, either usually through a query or sometimes, usually through a query. You want to do this through a query. But there you have it. That's how you would copy and duplicate and do all these cool things. So it's a very simple SQL statement. So here is the code again. Practice typing this stuff in. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot. Remember when we had the error on the sum totals here? What you have to realize is if there is an error in any one of these footer sum boxes, it will error out all of them. So that's one thing, and you kind of saw that on the video, is that you have to remember that you have to have all of these properly accounting. So if you need to account for nulls, use your NZ. If you for some reason something's not adding up, or you're trying to do some kind of operation, let's say here, remember to do an NZ. That way that thing will work. So for instance here, we got lucky. These are nulls because these are zeros. So you'll notice that val1 and val2 did not work because it can't add null plus 189. So it just stopped. But that's okay, it's not counted. Sometimes though, especially with text, you're going to get errors. So you need to use your NZ functions to account for if there's nulls in that fields. I hope this helps. I hope so much. Again, this may not be exactly what you're looking for, but use the concepts and think through it. If you have any questions, please comment down below. Thanks so much. God bless and have a great day.